Yeah.
morning.
No, right.
Grand Rising, Jeff, everyone.
Yeah. Good morning. Good
Good
morning. Good
morning.
morning.
Good
Yeah.
Thursday to everyone. Wow, it's been
Yeah.
some week. Hope everyone's doing great. Thanks for joining us. We have a lot of new people who've subscribed to the channel. Jeff, you were on Archaix with Jason. Shout out, huge shout out to
Yeah.
Archaix and Jason. What an
Yeah.
amazing show that was.
Yeah. That was a good show. I like him. I like Jason. He's got a brutal honesty that I really like. He's a character, man. So
He's just awesome. And the show that you had together, I mean, I felt like you'd known each other for years. It was that kind of energy. And he
yeah.
is just a wealth of knowledge, and so are you. And it was just
Yeah. We had fun.
magical, in my opinion. It was a wonderful, wonderful show. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, we're on a wavelength on a lot of things together. So that's good. I like that.
Yeah. So what's happening today astrologically with our energy?
Well, today is not a bad day. I mean, we got the moon is opposing Venus. You got, that's actually going to be over with about 8 p.m. tonight. That's a little bit of a wonky energy. When you look at the nakshatras, the Vedic nakshatras, the moon right now, let me just double check that so I don't tell you wrong. The moon is in a nakshatra called Revati, and that is again ruled by Mercury. So it's again, it's a lot of news coming out. One of the things that we just heard is all these pagers blowing up, and now they've done it to two-way radio. So there's a lot of aggression going on in the Middle East right now with Israel and Hamas and these terror groups and Iran, and there's all kinds of threats back and forth. A lot of things brewing. And again, all this focus here in the United States has been on the election, which is fine. But I really think we're seeing the world stage brewing a lot. And I'm also hearing a lot of rumblings about the BRICS nations as well. And again, I've been saying Uranus is retrograding backwards to that fixed star. And that's going to happen right in about the second week of October, give or take. So I would not be surprised at anything between now and the second week of October. And even after that, Uranus is going back over a series of energies and hitting another really nasty fixed star right before it stations and goes direct in December, January. So we got some dicey energies coming up. And I also, think this whole thing with Diddy is another thing that's going to expose a lot of people. Record execs are resigning, and there's a lot of very interesting things going on right now that one is, I think, going to stir up and expose a lot people.
Oh,
So
you bet it
interesting
is.
times.
You
Yeah.
bet it is. We always talk about this, God knows what's truly going on in Hollywood and the recording industry and all that. Really, really, a lot of demonic forces there, no question about it.
Yeah, sure seems to be. Sure seems to be. No doubt about that.
So
So
what's this other fixed star that you're talking about? I don't think we've talked about it before that we need to be
it's
on
called
the
Denebola. It's called Denebola. It's interesting because astrologers use certain fixed stars that have kind of been traditionally handed down. But when you really look at how many there are out there, there's so many we don't even know the meanings of them. I mean, there's untold billions and billions of stars out there. But the ones the astrologers have picked are probably accurate to pick because they're closer or they have an influence in terms of their historical um, events that have happened when planets transit over them. And, again, Uranus, every time it does this, every 84 years, we get the world in turmoil. And of course, that's where we're at right now. And let's just hope that a major conflict that engages a lot of countries, and that's why they call them world wars, everybody gets on one side or the other. And let's hope nothing like that happens because it sure is brewing. And the fact that you can even hear the media saying this, oh, World War III is possible. I mean, I never thought in my life that I would hear that. I remember in the 60s, we used to go in the basement, the air raid sirens would go off and they were so loud. We had a school just a couple of blocks from where I grew up. And It was so loud. I mean, it was like really loud. And these air raid sirens would go off all the time, every week. They'd be, showing rehearsals. And of course, that was right after the Bay of Pigs with, you know, JFK and all the dissension that was going on between Russia and the Cold War. And here we are again. Again, I just heard that some cities, particularly Beverly Hills, is putting in these emergency siren stations again. Whoever thought,
Oh gosh, yeah, a friend of mine was
crazy.
telling me about that, and she's really, really nervous and nervous for her kids,
Oh yeah.
The other day in New York City, a friend of mine owns a business there, and there's a big news story about someone who was trying to jump the turnstile, and police just happened to be right there, 6 or 7 police officers, and the person who's trying to jump this turnstile pulled out a knife on them. And one of the police officers tried to tase him. The taser wouldn't work. They ended up shooting and killing this person. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh yeah.
it's just insanity,
Yeah.
insanity
Oh yeah.
what's
Well, that
going
stuff
on.
goes on all the time. That never stops. Yeah. You
We're
bet.
talking about somebody who was trying to jump a turnstile.
Oh, just jump a turnstile. So he
Yeah.
didn't pull out a knife or anything.
Oh no, he did. He
Oh, he
did.
did. Okay.
When the police tried to tase him, apparently he pulled
Hmm.
out a knife. But I mean, this is where it goes.
Oh
It's
yeah, you bet it goes there
crazy.
fast. Yeah, yeah. It's not a good idea to pull knives out at people. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, it just leads me to think about our charts and where we're all headed. And
yeah,
we talk about
yeah,
how we can get into certain situations or certain things can just arise at any time. It seems like it's out of the blue, but this is why I love looking at my transits and progressions. And I said the other
oh
day, I
yeah.
think everyone needs to tap into an astrologer or know your transits and
Or
progression
just know your transit.
because
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We've got Mars is going to station and go retrograde right in December. That's why I think this election, again, it's going to get crazy. I really do. No, no, again, that interrogation we did. And I've had a lot of people backlash me. Well, you're wrong. Trump has, Neptune squaring Mercury. Well, he doesn't have Neptune squaring Mercury for another 2.5 years. So, or a couple of years from now. And, I'm just reading the chart. I'm not trying to favor anyone. I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can. And that's what the chart looks like. And we'll see where it all goes. But if they don't kill him, and believe me, they're going to keep trying. I was just on a radio show last night talking about that, where literally Trump is not out of the woods. And I was looking more at his transits until probably next May. And again, when you go against the owners who really run everything in the Western worlds, that's not a good thing. So, there's all kinds of media reports coming out about cover-ups and very questionable things that senators are finding. And that's what we saw. Remember back in July 13th when we did our first live we jumped on when that first assassination attempt happened. And I'm going to tell you, there was like a rash all over that chart that was an inside job. It really looked like it was a top-down, allowed to happen situation. So we're going to see where it all goes. It's going to be a very interesting election, I can tell you that, because there's going to be a lot of people angry one way or another, no matter who wins. And again, if that interrogation is right, it looks like a lot of trouble, but it leans towards a Trump win. So I can get the hate mail for that or the applause mail for that, but I'm just reading the chart, you know.
I know. We all have to remember that, right? It's no matter what we ask, it's you're interpreting the
I'm just looking at the chart. And the only
you're just
time
looking
I've
at the
ever
chart.
seen interrogation wrong is if I read it wrong. That's the only time I've ever seen it wrong. And, you got to really be careful. I always say interrogation astrology is an all wise, all tricky oracle. It really is because when you look at the diversity of topics that can come in, it's actually mind boggling. I mean, you can ask anything under the sun, but some of them really get tricky. You really, really have to have a good cup of coffee to look at some of them because they,
It's always the coffee. It's
always
always
the coffee.
the
But
coffee. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh no, the interrogation astrology is no joke. Remember I asked
it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah, I asked about moving to a different apartment at one point,
Yeah.
and it showed that Mars sitting smack dab in the seventh house. And I was like,
Yeah.
no way am I
Yeah,
going.
no way. Yeah, and remember, you did that once. You moved to one apartment and it had Mars in the seventh house, and you said, I'm just going to go. And it was your worst nightmare. You
Oh,
remember that?
it was hell. It was
It
crazy.
was hell. Yeah, it was hell. I mean, you had neighbors and, it was just parties at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you're calling the cops and, you know,
It was literally
crazy.
Mars. It
Oh,
was
yeah, it
Mars
was Mars.
20
Yeah.
24/7. Yeah. 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 So when I saw that another time, after that, I said, no way. No,
Yeah.
but it's always accurate. And again, it's how the astrologer
I
interprets.
think your good mic came off, so you might want to just reset your
Oh,
USB cable. No, the probably the USB cable in the computer. But you're on your computer mic. I can hear you echoing. We can
wow.
still hear you, which is fine. But there you got it. I can see the light come on. Oh, now it's not
Oh,
there. It might. I think you got it. I think you got it. That's it.
bumped it and I noticed it come back on. Sorry about
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh my God, that sounds so much better. So
Okay.
everybody will probably
Thanks for pointing
appreciate
that
that.
out.
No
Well,
problem.
let's jump into some of the questions that we had back on Tuesday, Monday, excuse me, because I promised
Sure.
we backtrack a little bit. And the first one is Tucker. Good morning, Tucker. Thanks so much for joining us. See you here. But on Monday, and you actually addressed this on Archaix yesterday. Both you and Jason spoke to this. Tucker was asking which tribes of American Indians were consulted with the creation of the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, I heard it was the Iroquois. I think there was another one too, so don't quote me. But yeah, I believe the Iroquois was one of the tribes, and I think there was one additional one, but I don't know which one it was. Um, and the reason we brought that up is because that was just the anniversary of the signing of the Constitution when I was on Archaix that day. And I believe it was signed in 1787. So even though the Revolutionary War completed and we got our independence in 1776, the Constitution itself was either ratified or fully put in place in 1787. I brought that up because there's been a lot of attacks in the media about this. In fact, one person, I think in the New York Times, was saying, "Oh, we got to get rid of the Constitution. It's the problem." And they were, of course, quoting about the issues with the Electoral College. Well, what's interesting is when you really look at the Constitution, it truly is sacred. I mean, I really encourage people to get a copy of it. I've actually had quite a few copies that I've been getting in here, and I got one for a birthday present too last year, and they're not very expensive. And I have to tell you, the more you read these documents, the more you go, wow, these people were not only smart, but they were really aware of human nature's ability and evil for tyranny. And see, this is why I think the United States is under such attack right now, is because it stands directly in the path of tyranny and the new one world order and all this stuff, because it's specifically designed to counteract tyranny. You got to remember the monarchs back in the day, a few hundred years ago, if they said your shoes were untied, they could throw you in prison for life or draw and quarter you. I mean, when you look back at some of the stuff that the human race has done to one another, I mean, wow. I mean, like they would have like in Hunchback of Notre Dame, they'd literally put you on, I forget what they call it, but it was this tourniquet that they'd sit there and whip you in front of everybody and everybody'd clap. It's like Braveheart. They draw and quarter you in front of everyone. Well, it's like the Roman, gladiators. And what's so great about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and also, the amendments is it really protects everyone of any race, any creed, any religion, and most importantly, our freedom of speech, which is clearly under attack. Look at Newsom, also affectionately known as Gruesome, here in the California just passed a law that you cannot use AI for any political means. I heard if you make a meme and you put it on the internet and they catch you, it has anything to do with politics at all. Um, you can get fined. I think it's like $140,000. I might be wrong on that exact number, but it's a lot. It's an awful lot. And just think about that. That's a direct attempt on freedom of speech. And this is something that was, I mean, Braveheart is such a great movie to watch. Everybody loves Braveheart. And, you saw the suppression, with the English doing what they were doing to the Scots and, the Irish, and it's pretty wild. And the Constitution and our Bill of Rights is probably one of the most profound documents ever drafted in modern history that we know about. And they've been short-circuiting it one way or another. It was really interesting. Thomas Jefferson actually he succeeded in creating something called the 13th Amendment prior to the current 13th Amendment that we have. And you can look this up on the internet. There was a group of detectives who just discovered this about 20 years ago. They printed like 10,000 copies back in the late 1700s. The original 13th Amendment was that no barristers, meaning attorneys, could hold office in the White House because they said if we let attorneys in, they will figure out how to short circuit the Constitution with all these little bylaws. Sound familiar? Look at the Patriot Act, on and on and on and on. Not that certain things aren't good, but they have short circuited so many things and have tried to. And of course, what's interesting is that got buried. See, then when the Civil War came along, the new 13th Amendment was put in, which is great. You can't have slavery, which is perfect. Nobody should be a slave. And that's, throughout history been a problem for many races, is slavery. Go watch Spartacus sometime and other movies like that. It's horrible what happened to the human race. Anyways, the original 13th Amendment, which kept out barristers, was omitted when the Civil War was completed. And of course, the new one was put in. They didn't amend it to it. So there's always been attacks on the Bill of Rights and the Constitutions. And this is why America stands directly opposed to a new one world order. And I think, that's why the attempt to destroy this country has been so blatant lately.
Yeah. That's truth for sure. It's truth for sure. Rocky Stucci Jr., hello, Grand Rising. He's asking, I always love your questions, Rocky, and this one's quite different. Here's a good question, he says. When looking at a transit chart, can one see in their life when they could meet the one? What aspects indicate meeting the one?
Yes, especially what I love is Nadi astrology. Nadi astrology, spelled Nadi, is actually, in my opinion, much older than some of the Vedic astrology that's kind of surfaced in the last couple hundred years. And it looks at transits in a much different way. And the reason it does is because it looks at signifactors. See, a lot of people say to me in readings, well, how did you know my dad was that way? Like yesterday, I was doing a reading for a guy who had never met his father. And I said, oh, what's going on with your father? I says, he was never around. He says, yeah, I met him in prison once. He said, that was the first and only time I ever met my dad. He said he was arrested for carjacking when he was 18 years old, and he got put in prison. And the guy 2 cells down was his dad. That was the first and only time he met his dad. And yeah, and it was in the chart. Well, where I'm going with this and why I'm saying this is because Nadi astrology and most of your traditional and older astrology, when I say traditional, see, modern astrologers use a kind of a rebaked system that happened pretty much in the 1900s. If you go pre-1600, you get into something called classical or traditional astrology. And it's a lot different than modern astrology. And this is tropical too, by the way. Also, Vedic and Nadi astrology are sidereal. So either one that you use uses signifactors. And you might say, well, what is that? Well, signifactors are the sun is your father. The moon is your mother. Venus is a wife for a man. Mars is a husband for a woman. So, and then you can also look at the siblings too, because they take on different signifactors in that. But generally, I find when someone who asks, am I going to meet someone? The first thing I look at is, when is Jupiter going to aspect by the trines to Venus? If it's a man asking. If it's a woman, I look at, when's it going to aspect Mars? And it's interesting because Jupiter is the signifactor for the life force energy. And ironically, it's the largest planet in the solar system. So the skeptics always go, well, yeah, but it's just a planet with gravity and moons and all that. Yep, that's true. But Jupiter also represents the third eye chakra, connected to the pineal gland, psychic, intuition, and also our connection maybe to the, you could say, very high self, the other layers of the soul. And whenever I see certain transits happening to configurations in the chart, you can just about bet that they're going to have an opportunity to meet. Now, you also have to look at the rest of the chart to see when configurations join. Like marriage often happens when Jupiter is joining the signifactor for a partner, and you'll find that Saturn karma is usually involved in that same configuration by a trine or opposition or conjunction. And you'll also find Mars is usually in there. So, like when I was growing up, I had a lot of different girlfriends. I lived with a few different people, and I never thought I'd ever get married. And then at 42, I had that configuration, and that was when my son was born, 43. So, I think it was just 43 when he was born. And, go figure. And I never had that configuration line up like that before. So it's really interesting. Not only can you see relationship issues in transits, but you can also see when really karmic energies are going to release. The big one is always Saturn's transit of the moon. Now, many Vedic astrologers say that word sadhisate, and that's what it is. It's the sign before, during, and after the moon. See, the moon represents the general, you could say, emotional perception of reality, the mind, and Mercury is our logic. So very interesting stuff. And it's a whole nother way of looking at astrology. It took me a long time to really understand the tenets of Nadi astrology. And believe me, you'll never be done. And what's so interesting is comparing, thousands and thousands of charts, how accurate it is. And we are literally, I always say, forget Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus. This is truly the matrix of the soul here going on. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And someone could also just ask a question about that, right?
Mhm. All the time I get that. Yeah. See, the Eastern horizon becomes the querent, the person asking the question, and the seventh house is always a partner, see, or a would-be partner, or a current partner that you're with. So there's all kinds of stuff here that you can look at. Interrogation astrology is amazing. It really is.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
do
yeah.
anything from, where's my cat, to where's my keys, to lost items are a bit tricky to get all the time, but you can always see when it's going to happen or not. And timing is the hard one to get, but it certainly gives you good indicators. I have a lot of corporations that hire me, and they'll say, "Hey, we've got this current CEO. Should we keep him or fire him?" The board members will say that, or they're looking at hiring a new CFO or whatever it is, and key players in the company. And we use interrogation, and it's been highly accurate.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Highly
I've used
accurate.
it. We've both used it many times.
Yeah.
Many
Oh
times.
yeah. It's amazing. It's actually proves the universe is an interactive consciousness, because and people are skeptical. Well, how could that be? Well, the Eastern horizon never stops moving. It's going to go through 360 degrees every single day. That's why we have sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight. And when you take each degree, especially when you use ancient astrology, the signifactors change. It's not just the sign like modern astrologers use. You have multiple signifactors that can happen in one sign. The same thing in Prashna and Vedic astrology. So it's not that simple. Modern astrology is really watered down when you get into the tool sets that are available in classical, traditional, Vedic, and Nadi astrology. It's absolutely amazing. One of the documents that really blew my mind, and I have it here, is called Yavan Jatika. And this was, I think, don't quote me, but I think it's somewhere around the first century that it surfaced. But that doesn't mean it was created then, but many scholars think it was right about then from the way it was written. But with all the wars and attacks back and forth throughout history, history's marked, it's pockmarked with wars, never achievements, just wars. And then what's interesting is this document was about interrogation astrology. And this is, literally almost 2,000 years ago. And there's speculation that there could be versions of it that are much older. And this gets us back into Egypt and Chaldea and Sumeria, and of course, ancient India. These documents really purport they knew that consciousness was interconnected with the celestial influences. Because how many people had their birth time back then? You didn't even have clocks.
Oh my gosh, I know. You didn't even have clocks. So
Right. I
fascinating.
mean, you'd have knowledgeable people. I always show this here. I think I got it here somewhere. This is something that came in somewhere. I think the first astrolabes showed up in Europe somewhere around, I could be wrong, but around Chaucer's time, they became very developed. But this is what we call an astrolabe, and you'd actually rotate it and line it up with the configurations. It actually has plates for different latitudes as you go north and south. And it's pretty amazing because it has not only the zodiacal signs, and this thing's complex. I don't know if you can really see it, but there's all kinds of little lines in there. And then on the back, you can gauge heights and all that stuff. So they would take the shadow of the sun. So again, they would use sundials or take the shadow, and then somebody come running back into the master astrologer in the king's court, and he'd cast all the charts, and start interpreting them. And today we have just an amazing amount of accuracy with the new computer programs. I mean, I'm actually really surprised at what computers can do right now. And it allows me in readings to just cover an immense amount of ground that I could never cover without a computer. And it's pretty astounding when I go back through history and I read stuff 2,000 years plus back at how accurate these astrologers were and how much work that took to get there. They were using tables, in a click of a button. I can get all those tables in seconds.
Amazing.
Less than
Truly
seconds,
amazing.
actually.
What
Yeah.
what they were able to tap into and accomplish back then is pretty astounding.
Oh yeah, even my mother and I in the 70s. I mean, when we were casting charts, it's 20 minutes to cast a birth chart and start examining with accuracy transits and progressions. And if you're doing secondary progressions, it's going to take a lot longer than that. You could be a half an hour just calculating those. And these people were doing this stuff 2,000 plus years ago. And I think they were doing it a lot longer than that. I think much has been lost in Egypt, Chaldea, and Greece. And many scholars have began translating that stuff. Some of the best stuff I've got was translated between probably 100 AD through about 800 to 900 AD. Stuff was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And it seemed to crescendo right around the 11th and 12th centuries. And then after that, it fell off and then kind of got more the 15th to 16th century was starting to get a little watered down. And then by the 1700s, forget it. The religions stomped on this. It's a work of the devil, right? So that it was over. And then we had the rebuilding kind of come back with the spiritualist movement. Blavatsky and Ledbetter and many, many others came back in the 1800s and early 1900s. And I think Carl Jung, too, had a lot to do with the revival of astrology and to be more accepted by people because he was, again, the psychiatrist who really delved heavily into astrology. But the old stuff is the good stuff. It really is. It's absolutely amazing. The stuff they knew about the moon, the stuff they knew about different segments of the zodiac that modern astrologers don't even know about. They're called the essential dignities. And then, of course, in Vedic and Nadi astrology, that's where rubber really hits the road. You have all these complex mathematical computations of divisions of signs. And I have to tell you, the deeper I get into it, the more accurate it is. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. A1 is commenting on how you read Jason's chart on Archaix. Again, big shout out to Jason at Archaix. How you read his chart yesterday. It was
Oh
we
yeah.
went
Yeah, yeah.
pretty deep. And you actually, that was kind of like a mini reading in a sense, because you covered a lot, but
It was. I like to have my normal time to prepare for a reading is a minimum of a half an hour. I actually kind of prefer 40 minutes because I have a sheet that I have printed out, and it allows me to go through and make all kinds of. I have to fill it in, which allows me to do all these calculations and cycles. And it's a full sheet. It's a lot of work. But when I'm done and I go on the Zoom and I'm ready for a client, I have a lot of information, and nobody's the same. Nobody has the exact same cycles. They couldn't. And there's general things that are repetitive for all of us throughout our lives, but everyone is an enigma and a riddle, and you really got to study it. I like it. It's very intellectually challenging to unravel, you know, what's this one's story, because we all got a story. Every human being has a story. We all have a place we came from, not only in this lifetime, but in many lifetimes. And it's interesting to see, and that was the theory behind Vedic and Nadi astrology, is that you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. And astrology, the birth chart, is the synchronization of time and karma. And it really is. And if you look at it that way, and again, to bring up one of my favorite psychiatrists, which is Dr. Carl Wickland, he gave scientific proof, in my opinion, that nobody dies. He had so many conversations with disincarnate souls through his wife as a medium, where they would prove, oh my God, yeah, he fell off a roof and landed on a pile of lumber. He thought he just got hurt, but he died, and he was possessing someone else, you see. And there's just so many events of every walk of life, and most of them didn't even know they were deceased. They didn't even know they were gone. And some of these were in religions, and they said, my religion never taught me this. Well, actually, if you go back to the origins of your religion, it might have, but the people in it dogmatized it as years went on. And I have to say, what's been done to Christianity is quite interesting, because when you go back to the original tenets, I always mention the Magus of Strovolos. Boy, you'll find it's a whole different world than what Rome did to it. And remember, these are the people nailing people to crosses,
Mm.
planting them in the ground and watching them die. So interesting. Rome was the place originally that was doing rituals outside of a city to chase away the guardian angel of the city so they could attack it easier.
Wow.
Interesting.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah. They
beyond.
say there's an angel formed anytime you build a house or a dwelling. There's angelic forces that literally are around everything. It's pretty wild. Pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I know you give certain prayers when people move to a new place, before
Yeah,
you,
yeah. I
right?
do a lot of elections for real estate where someone will say, "Oh, I can't, I can't sell the house." So we'll give them a good time. I'll give them a good time to put it on. See, the buyer is the seventh house, and the seller is the first, the ascendant. And I always look for configurations when they sign with realtors, and do the same thing for surgery elections when you got to go for that.
Oh,
And
yeah. Not only that, though, I was talking more to when someone is about to move into their new
all right,
space.
yeah, there's a number of prayers that you can do to clear the place and get rid of any old energies within it. And actually you can go much deeper. There's actually really cool prayers where you can banish with the four archangels and you seal it. And it's kind of like washing the floor and then waxing it with protection, so it's really cool.
That's right.
It's
That's right.
interesting. My son was having a lot of problems. He's been, having some really difficult transits, and I could hear him. He's very upset. He had some issues with a girlfriend and all that, and very emotional, very, very, very emotional. And I actually did a remote clearing on him. I was laying in bed. I did a remote clearing on him, and after I cleared them, I did a protection. You just do this by astral projecting around them. And I think it was about 45 minutes later, he comes in and gives me a hug. I'm like, okay, all right, that seemed to help.
Yep, yep, that worked. That
Yeah,
helped.
that
Yeah,
worked. That's good.
yeah.
Yeah, and we can do. All of us can learn to do this. Again, again, I don't want to bash religions here because there's a lot of great people in religions and really holy people of all different denominations. But, one of the criticisms I have is the secrets have been hidden from the human race. That's one of the reasons I enjoyed being on Jason's show, is uncovering what has been hidden from us. And particularly, every one of us have so much power to project when we realize it. And see, again, going back to the Constitution, going back to the Bill of Rights and all that, why has America become the biggest, most developed country in the world? Look at China tried that. They built all these complexes and buildings and houses. They're all empty. You can't force and suppress a society. When you have freedom, freedom gives the human spirit encouragement to create. That's entrepreneurialism and so on and so forth. And what's so interesting about that is that this goes right back to the religion. Suppression of consciousness allows us to be in a box, and you become very, very downtrodden. And that's well known in mind control. If you can suppress the conscious mind, you can control anybody to do anything through pain and pleasure. So, and humans are a bit wired for that kind of treatment. And the more we expand our mind, we realize we can learn so many things that add so much to our consciousness and help others as well. So it's really,
Absolutely.
really cool stuff. I got to watch my
Absolutely.
time today because I
Yeah.
have
Mhm.
a thing I have to get ready for. And we
Yeah, let
only
me
had
throw this last one at you.
okay,
Um,
because I really got to go.
Yep, Tucker sharing he has the fixed star Shiat from the leg of the white-winged Taurus in his chart. It's
Oh, wow.
often called the suicide star. Is there a fixed star of life, intellect, or vitality?
Oh God, the fixed stars, we could talk all day about that. The fixed stars are absolutely stunningly amazing. Many different people throughout history have sought to kind of index them. And I've got a lot of really good documents on the fixed stars. And many of the computer programs, particularly SolarFire and Kepler, give you descriptions of them. The problem is somebody typed it in there, and I don't agree 100% with a lot of them. But I have some really good stuff. Like Vivian Robson did, I think that was in the late 1800s, did a really good codex. One of the better ones that I have is out of India, where they took some of the Egyptian, the Roman, and the Vedantic meanings of the fixed stars. But yeah, I mean, you bet. You want to talk about, they actually say the fixed stars are the secret helpers and hinderers, but they act differently for everyone depending on the aspects in your chart and the placements in your chart. See, there's what they call the Egyptian bounds. And then in Vedic astrology, there's the Navamshas and also the Trimsamsas. These are all mathematical divisions of signs that are very complex, but they rule certain karmic elements. So again, what you've got is an extremely complex matrix where every planet, every star can have different influences depending on where it is and how it's aspected. So it's really, it's clearly a matrix. There's no question about it.
Oh, yeah. So what about fixed stars for life and intellect or vitality?
Oh God, yeah.
You're
I just
saying
said,
there are
I mean,
tons.
fixed
Yeah.
stars, you have a myriad of psychological and also you could say energetic variances throughout. It's a myriad. I mean, we could sit here all day and talk about all the different fixed stars. They're extremely powerful. If you have a planet that is aligned with one, that's going to influence that planet hugely. If you have a trine to it, that's different. If you have a square to it, opposition, conjunction, again, you have infinite combinations to these fixed stars in your chart. And there's also what they call parans. Parans are midpoint like points that they join. So it's a really complex subject. But yeah, fixed stars are amazing. So I got to run because I'm really going to be late otherwise. But
Yeah,
it's
you've got
fun.
your 10 o'clock. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for this.
you
Thanks,
got it.
everyone. Have a beautiful day.